Jacson Bevins from Cigar Thoughts joining us on the HawksZone Rundown tonight. Jackson's one of our favorite guests to have on. He has a big-time podcast that has prime-time guests on his show, and he's coming back on to talk some off-season ball with us. John Schneider just had his press conference. We're going to get his thoughts on his takeaways from John today, and we're just going to break down players that he thinks that might not be on this roster anymore and how we're going to free up money. What the Geno Smith contract extension could look like. What are the priorities for the offseason? And, we're obviously going to get into some offensive line talk to see how we fix that. So before we get into all that, guys, if you like what you're watching, go down, hit the sub button, like the video, share the video, and it's just a great way to support the channel. Hit the bell, too, so you know when future episodes are rising. You can also buy us a coffee. Also helps support the channel. So we're going to waste no more time. On the other side, Jacson Bevins.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about me.
Yeah, let's go. It's go time, baby.
Here they come. Geno steps up, takes that shot to the end zone. It is Metcalf, 20.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You about to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Off me.
Nobody in the world can do it.
Are you kidding me? He's trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Jacson Smith and Jigba. The circus music moves in. Throws for Baldwin. Oh my goodness, he caught it. By the run of the radio.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
Jacson Bevins from Cigar Thoughts back on the HawksZone once again to join us to talk some off-season ball. Jackson, it's been a minute, but we appreciate you coming back on, talking Hawks.
Yeah, man. No, I'm stoked. I've been looking forward to this. Always appreciate a chance to talk ball with you guys. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, yeah, 100%. So let's get into it. So, the latest has been John Schneider took the podium, had a press conference today. A lot. He's had a couple of weeks with his show, the John Schneider Show. So it was kind of the first we got to hear from him, talking about just, certain moves and certain things, especially the O-line has been a topic of conversation. What do we do there? Are we going to sign a guy? Are we going to draft guys? Or is it going to be business as usual? Now he comes out, press conference. Any initial thoughts from today's presser with John?
Yeah, I think, just the more that you hear McDonald and Schneider talk, the more it seems like Geno Smith is going to be the quarterback. And, I think the thought right now is that a deal gets done here in the next 3 weeks before March 16th. That's when there's I think a $16 million contract bonus due to Geno Smith. It's in the team's best interest to get a deal done prior to that if they can, in order to give them more flexibility with that money in terms of how much it counts against what's right now a pretty tight 2025 cap. So, but yeah, Mike McDonald has been unequivocal recently about Geno being the quarterback. And frankly, if he's not, I know there's a lot of people out there who want to move on because they think there are better quarterbacks in the world than Geno Smith. Well, I agree with you, but there's not a lot and they're not available. So, I think the team sees that there's just not really a path in this draft or this free agent class or this trade market to improving on Geno Smith. So I expect something to get done there. That was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, that was one thing I found really interesting was just when John, even on his, when he was on Pro Football Talk with Chris Sims and Mike Florio, again, Geno was he's our guy. It's all about, we have to give Geno a pocket. We have to do these things. And you're not talking that way. And I know people want to say, oh, they're posturing and so on. When they were moving on from Russ, there weren't those types of discussions being had as much as they are now with Geno. And it's very much evident to me. I think they're looking at last year with Geno and going, we actually failed Geno Smith rather than Geno Smith failed the Seattle Seahawks with his performances of interceptions and everything that everyone wants to hold on to. They're not looking at just, you were asking a quarterback to drop back 75% of the time without a run game and not throw quick passes. We're talking about throwing the ball vertically down the field with an O-line that was essentially like Swiss cheese. So what do you expect to happen? And then now I think they've gone back. They've done, obviously, their evaluations of their areas. And I think that's the thing that's come out of this is I think they think Geno can help get them to the playoffs and push for that, potential game in the NFC Championship game. But I don't think it's taking John away from the other fact, which he knows he needs to draft somebody for the future. Geno's not going to be here for 10 years, 7 years. He's maybe got 3 more really good seasons in him, but let's maximize those 3 good years by also bringing in somebody that can learn from Geno.
Yeah. And I mean, if that guy presents himself in this draft, great, go for it. They're outside of right now. I mean, we'll learn a lot more over the next couple of months here, but right now there's not really someone I'm like stoked on them. That I don't see quarterbacks outside of the first round, and I really hope they don't use their first round pick on a quarterback. I don't see guys that are like noticeably better than Sam Howell. And so I would hate to see them like force a quarterback pick to learn behind Geno when that part of the draft class is projected to be much, much deeper next year. You have other holes on a 10-win team, a team that is ready to compete right now in a division that suddenly looks wide open. I'm all for go get that next quarterback if he's there, but I don't think you force it, because the reason this team didn't make the playoffs, if you were to prioritize that list of reasons, quarterback play is way near the bottom. And you have too many other holes that you need to fill. And look, John Schneider's heard the noise. He understands. He's not shying away from the fact he understands that this offensive line needs to improve. And so I think it's going to be a pretty thin free agent class when it comes to that. So yeah, don't force a quarterback draft pick this year when you need to allocate as many resources as you can to the interior of your offensive line.
Yeah, let's talk about those needs. I mean, you talk about the quarterback, and I know you're high on Geno. Hey, let's get this guy some help, right? Let's get this guy some time in that interior. Do you think that you talk about the thin class? We talk about Clint Kubiak and his schemes, the importance of that center, right? That center in Kubiak's scheme seems uber important. Now you got Oluwatimi and Jalen Sundell, and Oluwatimi lost his job before season started to Colin Williams, and he retires, he gets it back. But a young guy, right? There's a lot of developmental guys on that line right now. And the nice thing that we both took out of that is that they all got NFL experience last year, and so for those developmental guys to have that NFL experience coming into year 2 is huge. But do you see John making a move in free agency here for maybe a center, the guy with a little more experience? There's a couple of guys that are on the list that could be potential veteran guys that could come in.
Yeah,
here.
who do you like? Who do you
well,
like?
There's Kelly from the Colts. He's older, and Bryce likes Dahlman from Atlanta, right? Yep. Which he's a younger player. He'd probably be the first choice, right? But again, you talk about Schneider hearing the noise. Do you think because of that, hey, let's at least go out and try to get a decent name there and then keep building through the draft? Or what are your thoughts there with Schneider and the moves with the O-line? And obviously, I'm assuming you think that's priority number 1 for this team.
Yeah. I like Dahlman a lot. I mean, I like Kelly a lot too. I mean, the guy has proven himself over and over again. I'll be curious to see which one of those guys commands more money on the open market. But those would be the 2 that I feel like I have confidence in being better than like a day 2 or a day 3 draft pick. And, at this point, John, just if you're going to fail at the offensive line, fail different, man. You've failed by trying to convert tight ends and defensive ends and basketball players. You've failed by trying to use day 3 picks. You've nailed your tackles. You're good there, I think. But the interior of the line, man, what you've never tried to do is spend free agent money on the interior of your line. You've traded, you've done 3rd wave, 4th wave free agency stuff. Fail different, man. Take a swing. Spend the money on a center. Spend the money on a guard. Fuck it. Get Trey Smith. Do that, right? Find the money. Do that. Extend Geno. Extend DK. Figure out what you're doing with Riq Woolen. take care of Ernest Jones. When you've done that, you can free up a ton of money and then go get Trey Smith. And if you fail by doing that, okay, but at least you've done the thing that we're all clamoring for you to do.
No, and that's the one thing, like listening to John even today in his press conference, and then when he was on PTF live with Sims and Florio, I could sense in his, demeanor when he was talking about the O-line and then bringing in John Benton and all the guys, Rick Dennis, and this whole coaching staff that they've brought in is truly built on fixing this O-line. Like even Jason Peters now is in a role where he's a veteran mentor, but I think he's, in some respects, from what it kind of said between the lines, is he's going to have some role in how this O-line and helping these young guys along, which I think is great. Jason Peters is one of the best left tackles in the last, 2 decades almost in the NFL. And it's just, to me, that the coaches they brought in have such a O-line bent philosophy. And I think that's where they have finally made a bit of a change, rather than kind of like how you said, Jackson, like fail differently. Okay, we're going to really invest in our coaching staff with good guys that have come from good systems that know how to coach O-line. He even alluded that their evaluation of O-line is changing a bit, even with John Benson already being in the building, how they're looking at guys. And then I think there is a chance they may take a swing. We may wake up day 1 or day 2 of free agency, and all of a sudden Seattle's gone out and maybe landed a Trey Smith or a Drew Dahlman or someone that we're like, wow, they actually went and spent money on a upper echelon guy instead of going and getting the Lake and Tomlinson in wave 4 free agency for the veteran minimum deal. I think John's kind of got a different focus point now. And I think that's why you see maybe Mike's gotten through to him, where Pete might not have had such an emphasis on it because Pete knew how to do things his way. Maybe Mike's come in and kind of rattled the cage a little bit of John Schneider and been like, hey, you need to look at this and you need to try going a different way at it than what we've been doing, because what we've been doing for over a decade before I even got here hasn't been working.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. You just have to try something different. And it sounds like he knows that. And I think another kind of hidden subplot is it's easy to forget that Mike Macdonald was the last head coach hired last year. Or I think him and Dan Quinn essentially were, hired right at the end. And they had to slap together their rest of their coaching staff because they waited so long for Macdonald to become available. It's kind of the same situation that the Saints are in right now, waiting for Kellen Moore, right? Kellen Moore is their guy. They're not really trying to sell themselves on all the other head coaching candidates. They waited, they got the guy. Well, now all the other coordinators have been promoted and snapped up already too. So also you've got Macdonald last year learning how to be a head coach. And while I think Leslie Frazier was super helpful in an advisory role with that, this year he knows what to expect. He gets the full offseason. He knows who his coaches are going to be. He had a chance to go through this process with John Schneider and pick these coaches and put together a coherent plan for free agency and for the draft. He knows this roster now. He didn't know the roster last year. And so these are some of the things that you don't hear talked about a lot that are huge parts of a coach's first season. Shit, they won 10 games in his first season. I know it didn't look the way a lot of us wanted it to look, but we just can't get into a position where we start turning up our nose at that kind of results. And I expect him to have a much better handle on what an offseason looks like in 2025 than he had in 2024.
The other thing for me that stood out with Schneider's press conference, and it had to do with when he kind of addressed the fan base in a way. And he made the comment that Lumen Field is the best football environment, but he's like, the fans bring it every time. But then at the same time, he goes, the 12s give us an edge. They're a part of why we can compete with anybody at home, but we have to get Lumen rocking again. That is what it's all about. And basically saying, like, the fan base deserves a team that's in the hunt for the playoffs every year and in the playoffs, and we haven't been able to deliver that.
Yeah.
So I think he's even aware, like, about, how last year, obviously, the Green Bay game, the Minnesota game, all these fans and everything. And there was a whole thing about how Lumen wasn't as loud as it used to be. Well, kind of what our point's been so far is you have to do things that are going to excite this fan base to make them want to come and spend their money to go to a game. It's not cheap to go to a Seahawks game.
No.
So if I'm going to spend the money to do it and, say travel from a Bellingham or, Vancouver, Washington up to a game, I want it to be worth it. I want to enjoy the product that's being put out on the field. And I think John's maybe fully, now that he stepped out of being with Pete, maybe able to kind of recalibrate and see that and have that sense. That was the thing watching his presser last year, which I did, to this year, is the tone and difference with John. He's got a very different tone this year, which is nice to see.
Yeah, I think so. John is also adjusting because not a lot of head coaches, honestly, in the last 50 years that had as much power within the organization as Pete Carroll did. And so while John is one of the longest tenured GMs in the NFL, which I think is deserved. We've been hard on him and he has deserved a lot of it. He's also been the general manager of a team for 15 straight years, and that team has won the third most games in the NFL during that tenure. Like, that can't be lost. It's not like this is some idiot who can't figure out how to do his job. He just has had one very glaring weakness. And you make a great point about understanding that you need to have players that and a system that make people want to go to the ball game, that make people want to not sell their tickets to an opposing fan when it's going to be 28 degrees and raining, right? There has to be a really compelling reason. Seahawks games are always going to sell out. It's just what percentage of those are going to be wearing Seahawks jerseys. And so, it's like that offseason Hard Knocks with the Giants, that front office took so much shit for. One of the things that Joe Shane talked about in there is when it's like, hey, do we re-sign Saquon or do we let him go? He talked about, who are we putting on the ticket, right? Like, when you buy a ticket, there is the picture of a player on there. Those fans and their fans' kids got to be stoked about the player that's on that ticket. And so it's cool to hear John Schneider and Mike McDonald talk about how important that aspect of it is, because let's face it, the Seahawks have not been good at home, which is a crazy thing. If you look back 8-10 years to be like, wait, this team is actually 500 at home over a 6-year stretch. That's crazy. Better record on the road than at home. Like, you cannot have that. And a huge part of that is the crowd. The stadium was uniquely designed by a sound architect to maximize the effect of the crowd, and that effect has waned. And part of it is ticket prices, but part of it is I can also sell this ticket for a lot of money. I need to really want to be at this game in order to not do that.
Yeah, and you bring up, we're going to get into the roster, but you talk about the product and the third most wins in his tenure, but they have had a record of about 500 in the last, I want to say, 5 years. And when you look at that and you say, with ticket prices and all that combined, 28 degrees and raining, I don't even have to travel far, man. I might just slide on my 80-inch TV if I'm downtown Seattle, right? I mean, it's true. And hey, that's the other thing that they're competing with. 10 years ago, that you didn't have these home setups like you do, especially when you can walk into a Costco for $500. So it all that's combined. So now you even have to pay attention to that even more with your product. You talk about marquee guys. The NBA is a great example of that, right? I mean, I don't know how big of an NBA guy you are or people watching here, but with the huge Luka trade and the whole argument with not be, I don't know if they want to give him the super max because he drinks and stuff. The guy, it doesn't matter if Dallas doesn't win a championship. That guy is going to sell. Make so much money. It was the weirdest thing ever, but an example of
it was like the Mariners trading Griffey, man. It's just
my God.
I mean, at least we saw that coming.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if you just woke up one day and Griffey was traded. Like, at least we knew that.
I mean, you knew how there was that home. He wanted to kind of go back and play at home, right?
It would have been really like, you talk about Griffey.
We could talk about baseball all day if you guys want to.
I know, no, I don't want to derail the show.
Yeah, no, for real, because I'm a big ball guy. But getting back to the point, you talk about that marquee guy. The guys you put on the ticket, right? You talk about Geno Smiths, the DKs. What's your thoughts on the current state of this roster? Like, you talk about, we won 10 games. The division is what it is. We're right there in the mix. Mike McDonald's second year, all these things they seem positive. But what's your take on the current roster as a whole, and where do you see some need? I know we touched on O-line, but what other areas do you think we could sort of beef up? Maybe get a marquee name in here that's a little, maybe on on the edge. What's your thoughts on the current roster?
Yeah, my thoughts on the current roster, I said this on my show, is they're a league average offensive line away from being a 12-win team. And I really don't want to keep harping on this. I'm like actually steeling myself against this fact that we're just going to talk about the offensive line needs all offseason, right? But that's the situation that the Seahawks put themselves in. I think they are above average at quarterback, above average at running back, above average at wide receiver, maybe great at wide receiver. I think they are above average at their tackle positions, fucking atrocious on the interior of the offensive line. I think they're an average defensive line. I think they are an average linebacking crew with the chance to be very bad without Ernest Jones. And I think they have an extremely above average secondary. So to me, that's a team that's capable of winning playoff games if you plug the biggest hole in the hole of your boat, which is the interior offensive line. But yeah, so I would say overall, this is a B+ roster. It's like when you're playing sports in high school, right? It doesn't matter what your GPA is, as long as you're not failing any classes, you can still play sports. You can have a C- average. As long as you're not failing any classes, you get to go play. But if you have all A's and one F, and I'm not saying that the Seahawks have all A's, but they're pretty much A's and B's across the board, and then an F at interior offensive line, you don't get to play. You got to get to a passing grade in all of your classes. I don't need the Seahawks to have an A+ offensive line. That would be awesome, but shit, man, that's every fucking team's fans outside of Philadelphia and Detroit are complaining about their offensive line. That's not unique to Seattle. What you can't be is bottom 3 in every metric every year.
Yeah, and Jackson, it's funny because we had Parker Blake on yesterday who covers the Bengals and is an O-line guy. He goes down to Senior Bowl every year, and that's what he said. He's like, you guys talk about your offensive line and where it's at. He's like, there were some pieces there, but you need to go out and be more aggressive in getting proven talent, because he goes, I know bad offensive lines in Cincinnati. Like, we've had them. And he goes, but the things they've done over the last few years have really gone to address that, getting Brown, getting different guys in their MIMs and stuff like that to actually address those issues. And you're right. If the Seahawks don't fix this O-line, even though I think they're going to this offseason, I have hope, you're just stuck in neutral still, because it's not like, oh, okay, we don't really have a true number 2 receiver. We've got like 2 3s. Okay, we can work with that if we got an O-line that can block. We can scheme ways up to get guys open. But when your O-line's failing, your run game doesn't work, your pass game doesn't work, your offense doesn't work. And we saw that last year with Ryan Grubb. Like, me and Ryan were talking before the show. We both were excited when Ryan Grubb got hired. We were like, oh, cool. This is something new. They've gone out of the box. I hoped it worked. I saw what he did at Washington. He didn't have the O-line. They misvalued that position group massively again. And you saw the byproduct of it. The offense just sputtered throughout the year. There were moments where it looked great, but there's no consistency. And that's the biggest thing with the NFL. When you look at the teams that are playing late into the playoffs, it's usually to do, not necessarily that they have the best of something, but they have the most consistent of something. And that's the thing that I think Seattle needs to get to. They need to get to being a consistent team, game in and game out on both sides of the ball.
Well, especially if you're going to bring in Clint Kubiak, I mean, he is an under center offensive coordinator. And I think one of the frustrations Mike McDonald and a lot of fans had, myself included, with Ryan Grubb down the stretch, and you guys remember, I mean, I was very excited that they got Ryan Grubb. I thought that there was a lot of crossover appeal between the last version of the UW roster that he coached and the Seahawks roster. The glaring difference, of course, being that he had literally the best offensive line in college and then one of the worst in the NFL. But it's really difficult. He was running almost every play out of shotgun. And some of that, I think, is probably Grubb's stubbornness. But I think a lot of it is, how can I ask my 33-year-old quarterback to get under center, take the ball, and turn his back to a Swiss cheese interior offensive line, and then turn around and go through his reads off of play action, because Clint Kubiak is going to do a ton of motion and a ton of play action. But that means being under center. Play action out of shotgun doesn't scare defenses.
No.
It doesn't change how they line up. It doesn't change how their safeties or off-ball linebackers commit. You got to be under center to do that consistently. And in order to ask your quarterback to turn his back to a defense, you need to have faith that he's going to have 2.5 to 3 seconds to fake that handoff, turn around, and go through his reads, and then step into a throw. So that's my biggest concern / fascination is, all right, you went out and got your guy. Like, I like Clint Kubiak. I like what he did with a Saints offense that was completely decimated by injuries. But if you can't block, that offense don't work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think talking about Clint Kubiak, and I think we all agree, Schneider has to pivot, change his ways, or I mean, it could possibly be a death sentence if they have the same type of season, miss the playoffs, do the same 9-8 deal, or what? I don't even. We always screw up the math now with the extra game, but it's one of those things where, like you mentioned earlier, just go do it a different way, screw up a different way. Then at least he can look at ownership's face and say, I spent, $25 million a year on the Trey Smith.
Right.
I did it.
Right.
And my hands are tied now, guys. What do you want me to do? At least he can save face and say, hey, look, give me a couple more years here. Right. So that's going to be interesting. But the cool thing is they moved off guys last year, right? They moved off the linebackers quick. They moved off Ryan Grubb quick, right? And that would have been a scary thing. I know Bryce talks about, look, there's a few factors, obviously, but also Grubb just didn't seem like he was ready for the NFL. And now they got Clint, who's got he does have a proven track record in the NFL, working with guys like Brock Purdy, who was a Pro Bowler that year. They got to an NFC Championship. Justin Jefferson, although, primetime receiver, top, arguably one of the best in the league, most yards, worked with the Kirk Cousins. So he's got a nice track record. Comes in here, seems like he fits what Mike wants to do. How excited are you for Clint to come in and now he's, with a new offensive line coach, because we do have a lot of developmental guys. What's your thoughts on that now? Do you feel a lot more confident coming into this year, even though right now we haven't changed any guys, but even some of the young guys we have on that line, because some of that comes down to coaching too, right? You talk about a Christian Haynes and guys like that. So, what are your thoughts, with Clint, with the new offensive line coach, and just with the alignment with Mike Macdonald?
To the answer, to the question of, am I optimistic? No, I am not. And the reason that I'm not is a mea culpa on me, because I was extremely optimistic about Ryan Grubb and overlooked just how detrimental the deficiencies up front are. I am super encouraged by the fact that when the Saints were fully healthy in those first 2 weeks of the season last year, they were a goddamn Death Star. They led the NFL in points per game. They were averaging like 7.5 yards per play. Like Rashid Shaheed was Randy Moss. Taysom Hill was fucking Eddie George. Like it was wild times. And then the injuries started piling up, and they had it worse than most teams. But over the last 15 games, they averaged 16.5 points a game, which, for context, in 2016, the last year that the LOB led the NFL in points allowed, they allowed 16.5 points per game. So that Saints team, once the injury started racking up, was like an average NFL team offense going against the LOB every single week. That's what they were. The best defense in the NFL last year allowed almost 18 points per game. Over the last 15 weeks, the Saints scored 16.5. So injuries happen in the NFL. Now, look, the injuries were huge in New Orleans. It's Derek Carr. It's Taysom Hill, it's Chris Olave, it's Rashid Shaheed. I think they led the NFL in the most different starting offensive line combinations. So like, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just like, I guess I just need to see it first, because sure, fully healthy, I think Kubiak can cook. All the Kubiaks have cooked, right? But what do you do when the injuries happen? Because the injuries are going to happen. And I don't think Seattle has the depth up front, even if they're aggressive with the offensive line, to give me like a ton of confidence.
It's going to be interesting. I was really hoping they could have got Kubiak last year, but obviously they hired John hired Mike so late in the process. He had already, gone and chosen his path. The thing for me is I'm kind of in the same boat a little bit like you, Jackson, where I want to see what it's going to look like. I want to see what they are able to add to help that offensive line, because I'm not worried about our skill positions. I'm not worried about the quarterback. I'm not worried about the running backs. How do we get this offense going on the inside? And especially with the system they're talking about they want to lean into, which is this outside zone, your inside pieces to that are extremely important on getting the right leverage across as you run these run plays and setting up the backside holes that could present themselves. And if you're struggling at the guard positions, you're going to have problems. And that's why one player I'm interested, because of the Kubiak hire and John Benson hire, that I don't think is necessarily a bust, like everyone wants to kind of anoint him as one, is Christian Haynes. I think he's better.
Too early.
I think he is better suited for this offensive scheme than he was last year for the gap and power scheme that, Seahawks went to later on in the year. And that's why LeMay in a lot of ways beat him out and got more reps towards the end of the season, is because LeMay fits that scheme. I don't know if LeMay fits the zone scheme. And so now it's the other thing they have to do now that, John Benton and Clint Kubiak are here, is this is where that evaluation, like we were talking about earlier about the O-line, like get guys that fit the scheme. Stop trying to get just guys that don't necessarily work and you're trying to make them work. Get guys that will work, that come from that background and they can actually execute it properly, rather than trying to take whoever you think could eventually be that and they have some upside necessarily.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm really happy that you brought up the scheme that Clint has run in the past and presumably will try and run in Seattle. They're going to try really, really hard to run the football. And look, the NFL is cyclical and it takes years for the pendulum to swing back. But when passing offenses became so much more effective than run first offenses, that really started like 8-9 years ago. And they had like a 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7 year run where it's just like, why are you ever fucking running the football? Like, just pass. Look at the EPA on passes and whatever. Yeah. Well, the league adjusted. Everyone starts running the Fangio defense or some version of it with 2 high safeties. Linebackers get lighter. You don't have 260-pound off-ball linebackers anymore. They're all 235, right? You've got nickel corners in there instead of a will linebacker. That's what happened to the NFL. You had coverage safeties instead of tackling safeties. Well, now all of a sudden you have a very light defense. You just lighten the average weight of your defensive players by 10%. So now running works, right? And that's what we saw this year. We saw the teams that had the best offenses by and large, that went the furthest, had the ability to run the football. And running backs were the sacrificial lamb for that evolution. And now they're being lauded as, see what happens if you have a great running back. See what happens if you have a Derrick Henry or a Saquon Barkley. The fact of the matter is you can run the football to win games in the NFL again, because teams have changed how they draft and what they look for in traits on the defensive side, because they've been combating an increasingly efficient passing offense that is spread throughout the league. So I actually in the past, I've been frustrated hearing Pete Carroll say, we really want to run the football. And then thank God he actually never really did after like 2017, or was it 2018 was that awful playoff loss to the Cowboys. he ended up actually being like a top half of the league pass rate head coach. Well, now I think you can run to win. And I think Mike Macdonald wants to run to win. I think everybody wants to run to win. And because of the type of scheme that Clint Kubiak runs, all the fantasy players out there who think Zach Charbonnet has like usurped Ken Walker and might take over that role. I think if Grubb was still the offense coordinator, maybe this is a Ken Walker offense.
Yeah.
This type of blocking scheme is all about creating the lanes for Ken Walker to pick a direction and be the athlete he is, instead of having to read and react and try and identify where the holes are going to be, which is not his strong suit.
It's actually interesting because I was going to say, I think besides K9 and this offense, I think this actually benefits Kenny McIntosh as well, as another guy that this offense fits his skill set better than Charbonnet's. I think Charbonnet is probably skill set wise the one that has the most to lose now with Clint Kubiak's system coming in. He doesn't have the lateral speed to get to the edge and go be an athlete, where we saw Kenny Mack had some of that last year, where he got on some of their zone plays to that edge and then just bolted up the field. There could be a situation where Charbonnet maybe isn't as heavily used as he was last year in this new offense.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how versatile he is, because he did play in a couple of different schemes. I mean, he was in Chip Kelly's offense at UCLA, which was very spread out, and he was really effective at that. He also played at Michigan, which was the complete opposite. I do think Charbonnet is above average in both schemes, but to your point, Bryce, I agree. He's better in a man blocking scheme than Walker, arguably, or the gap is much smaller. I think the gap is larger, and McIntosh also, I think, benefits from his own blocking scheme as well. Although I don't see him taking healthy snaps away from Charbonnet.
Yeah, and I look at it, and even with just how well Sharps played at the end of the year, right? You can really see, and we talk about it, man. These guys are young dudes still. Bryce, you mentioned guys are writing off Christian Hayes. That's just stupid. The guy he was a rookie, right? Sharp's been in the league for 2 years, right? We're just so quick to write guys off, right? So when you look at Sharps, like people were talking about, hey, Sharps, maybe he's going to be out of here, whatever. Then he comes on in the second half of the year. So, I mean, it's going to be, it's a good problem to have that, you have a third guy like Kenny Mack, who is just going to create competition, right? Because I love Kenny too. So, we'll see. And you know what? Ken Walker's got to stay healthy, man, because that's been his crutch. We talk about how good he is in scheme, but man, they got a decision to make coming up in the future with him, because as talented as he is, man, he's been on the shelf a lot. So I'm hoping for a healthy year for Ken. I mean, we'll see. Time will tell. But speaking of free agents, the obvious one in the room is Ernest Jones. How do you, besides the free agents, also touch on maybe some guys that we can tie this in with some extension talk to, as far as maybe, because there's going to be some guys on this roster that are going to be coming into this year that, could be playing for some big money, like the Riq Woolens, the Mafes, guys like that as well. But free agent wise, Ernest Jones, who else is on that list? Anybody really that you got to rush out and sign besides him? And if we talk about Ernest, what's the likelihood of us getting that done?
Oh, I think it's north of 80%. If Ernest Jones's agent starts hearing talk of, teams being willing to offer him $18-20 million a year, with most of it guaranteed, well, okay, that changes the conversation. I don't anticipate that being the case. I think that he signs a very healthy deal in Seattle. I think he wants to be there. He even said that his wife told him we're not moving again. So and the team they're not pulling any punches. They're saying they want him here. It sounds like everything's been pretty positive. Other than that, I don't really care that much. They've got I think 17 or so potential, unrestricted free agents this year. And only one that I'd like to see them really make an effort at, but not like at the expense of bringing in a good interior lineman, is Trey Brown. I think Trey Brown's a fucking dog. And this is why the big thing they're going to have to figure out is who are they cutting, and they need to make that decision quickly. I think that if you cut Tyler Lockett, you know, all the respect in the world, biggest Cigar Thoughts salute imaginable. His salary does not fit his current talent level on this team anymore. It will for somebody, but it's not Seattle anymore. And
Raiders.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love that.
Awesome.
But, you know, I think he's entering his Adam Thielen phase of his career where he's that pro who's still going to go out there, still going to carve up defenders on, you know, 8 of his 40 routes and, you know, really set the tone for younger receivers. But he's not at a point where he can or should be taking targets away from DK Metcalf and Jacson Smith and Jigba, in my opinion, not at his price point. So make that decision early. Figure out Riq Woolen, right? If you want Riq back, extend that dude, because a corner with all pro votes and Pro Bowl and almost Defensive Rookie of the Year, I think he was runner up. That kind of guy, even with down games and even with most of a down 2023, those guys make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And if you let him become an unrestricted free agent after this year, it's going to be a lot of money. So make your decision on him now. Either sign him to the contract in $2025 or cut him. Don't put yourself in a position to have to make the Riq Woolen decision in 2026. If you cut Riq Woolen, sign Trey Brown. Keep him here. If you decide to extend Riq Woolen, I think you can let Trey Brown explore the market. But he's really the only other guy that I care about. I've seen enough flashes from Stone Forsythe that if you can bring him back super cheap, which I imagine you can, sure, one less box you have to check. He's familiar, you know, with this team. But no, man, outside of Ernest Jones, like, this defense changed when Ernest Jones showed up. There's nothing about it. Julian Love, who, by the way, was the first extension of the Mike McDonald era and a true leader of this defense, he was asked in like week 15, what's the biggest difference between how the defense is playing early in the year and how it's playing now? He was like, it's EJ. It's Ernest Jones. Like, he didn't even hesitate. So I think everyone knows that. You just take care of him. I don't really care that much about the rest.
It's interesting. For me, I'm the one other guy I'd like to see Seattle bring back, and I think they can bring him back on a team-friendly deal. And I think he actually had a really good season last year, was Jarran Reed. He's somebody I would like to see brought back into the fold just because he's got that kind of leadership side to him. You know, we saw what him and Derek Hall's interaction, but he can carry over and help stabilize that leadership. You got him, you got Leo there. Obviously, you bring back Ernest Jones. I completely agree with the decision needs to be made this offseason on what you're dealing with Riq Woolen. I would think you could almost even trade Riq Woolen and potentially get something in return for him because, like you alluded to, Jackson, he does have a lot of the characteristics a lot of people look at. So if you are going to move off of him and you're not going to bring him back in 2026 going forward, and he's not part of your future plans, I would try and trade him. You could probably trade him and get a mid-round pick or, you know, third-round pick for him. And someone's going to take that because you're going to take that skill set and go, yeah, we're going to get a top echelon corner, potentially still, you know, and we can work on a new deal and whatnot. I found it interesting with Trey Brown, though, last year because he seemed to fall out of favor in Mike McDonald's defense, which was interesting because Josh Jobe took a lot of his snaps, which I wasn't expecting was the UDFA Josh Jobe to come in and take snaps from Trey Brown because I really like Trey Brown. I thought he was a good corner when we drafted him.
And you know what? He's a restricted free agent this year. I think that's an excellent point. Whichever one of those two guys that McDonald likes better, just keep that guy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of my point. You either bring him back Brown or Jobe, and you're going to get good
I would also like to see Jarran Reed come back, and maybe his age, he's I think 33 now. Yeah, maybe that keeps his price down. I do agree with you there. I probably shouldn't have written him off so flippantly. Of course, all of this is price dependent, but yeah, the team is better with Jarran Reed. If you don't have to pay him north of, $8 million a year or whatever. Sure.
And that's the thing is he even made a comment last year, I believe, when they were talking to him about, hey, like, you left, you're now back, and how do you feel? And he kind of made the comment, like, I went and chased my money when I went to Kansas City and Green Bay and stuff, but this is like home now. And I think he's at that point, being 33, where you can get him probably on that deal that's maybe 8 million or in that area where it's, it's a 5 million with incentives up, whatever it ends up being. But I think he's a crucial part to that D line. And the other interesting, one that's going to be the domino to fall is, what are they going to do with Uchenna Nwosu? Because they pushed back his date, and it sounds like, per John's comments today, that they're in negotiations, so they're trying to do a restructure. But Uchenna's kind of had the worst luck because he signed that new deal, and then he's been hurt significantly the last 2 years, and we haven't seen the production we saw that first year when he was here. So I wonder what happens with Uchenna. But I agree, there's more discussion around, instead of who they bring back, is who they let go and move on from to create the cap space you're going to need for some of these extensions that they're going to have to dish out to create more cap space.
Yeah, I need to see a fully healthy Uchenna Nwosu and Mike McDonald's defense. Like, I just need to see that, because I think he has the potential to really outperform whatever contract they give him to extend him. I do hope they extend him. I know I get the strong sense that that's their goal, because they pushed back their deadline on when his roster bonus is due, and teams only do, like the Bucks just did that with Chris Godwin. Teams are only doing that with players that they are trying to sign, and they just need to buy themselves some more time. So I expect him to be back, but like, he wildly outperformed his contract without Mike McDonald, and I think he's uniquely suited to take advantage of that. But, for all the flack that John Schneider has taken with his draft classes, honestly, from like 2013 to 2017, he had like a 5-year stretch where he freaking stunk. He's been hitting lately, and when you're hitting, you got guys that are coming up. Boye Mafe is going to need some money. Boye Mafe needs to be a part of this team. We're early on Jacson Smith and Jigba. You're going to need some money. You're going to have a decision to make on Ken Walker. You've got like
whole class.
Charles Cross. I mean, it sounds like they're going to take the 5th-year option and that
then
buys
work on
you
a long-term deal.
That buys you time to get the long-term option. You got Abe Lucas. Like, you've hit on some dudes.
And you got one other guy you forgot to mention, Jackson. One of my guys that's been a favorite, Kobe Bryant. He's up this year.
Dude, totally. And I meant to mention him when we were talking about Trey Brown and Josh Jobs is like, Kobe Bryant's got real game. Quandre Diggs tweeted out recently. So I think the Seahawks tweeted like a highlight reel of Kobe Bryant, and Quandre Diggs quote tweeted and said, "Favorite player in the league." So like, Quandre is a freaking dude. So yeah, I would like to see that. But here's the thing. This is why you have to figure out who you're cutting, and you got to make those cuts. It's got to be Lockett. It's got to be Draymond Jones. It's got to be George Fant, Farrell Brown. Like, some of these dudes, you got to cut these guys, clear up some money, and then you need to be aggressive in sign. You look at the Philadelphia Eagles. Everyone's trying to be the Philadelphia Eagles right now. Well, you know what the Philadelphia Eagles do? They sign their best players a year early.
Yeah.
Because they get them pre-inflation dollars. Yep. They signed A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, and Devontae Smith to extensions, whereas you look at like the Cowboys and the Bengals, they're just like, wait to the last moment, and then you get all these other dudes signing who are lesser talents signing these big contracts, and now you got to pay even more. And it's like, I want them to be aggressive with their cuts. I want them to be aggressive with their re-signings, because once you re-sign a guy, you can move all the money around. That allows you to go attack Trey Smith in free agency. But like, you also people gotta have a little grace for John Schneider. He's a little bit victim of his own success in the draft recently, because Kobe Bryant and Boye Mafe and Ken Walker and Jacson Smith and Jigba, these dudes are going to require big contracts to keep around also.
You can't keep all. Oh, sorry. You can't. I mean, you can't keep all of them, right? So, I mean, there are huge decisions to be made, man. But like, you think there's a couple of guys like we talked about Riq that are like, you talk about Riq. There was some disciplinary things that sort of seemed like Mike was unhappy with. He benched him that one game for the first series or whatever. And there was a couple other things about the whatever partying and all that stuff. And then obviously showing up on the field, sort of sometimes his head's not there. I mean, a guy like that, do you think there's a couple of guys that they might want to wait and see one more year, because he's going to demand like, 90 million per se, we're talking big time money that you now want to lock up with a guy that you're not sure, mental side of of things, not the physical tools that we all know. Yeah, he's a freak of nature, 4'2", he's long,
Right.
Cover the go route like nobody. But those other things, like to me, there's a couple of guys, because you talk about Chenna. Like, do you think they're thinking like, we need, if we're gonna really pay a guy like, say, an edge, like we want a guy maybe just a step above a Mafe, or you know what I mean? Like, do we have that marquee guy? Like Derek Hall's nice, Mafe's nice, but these guys will command. You are going to lock up a lot of coin with these guys if you start dishing them out. I love Kobe Bryant. I think that's a deal that has to get done. But with the other guys, like, I don't know. We're always debating a Riq. We're always like, Mafe, you got to pay, but you're not. How stoked are you to lock up a ton of money with them? You know what I mean? Like, do you think they might be thinking like, maybe there's an edge out there that's just a bit better that maybe will hold off? And like, yeah, depth's huge, but I don't know. I look at it like that, because there's still like, do we have those blue chippers all around the place, right? Like, I think we're close, but I don't know if you got it there with Mafe, right? So do you think the Seahawks might be thinking that we're not jumping at the gun to throw money at some of these guys, even though, to your point, you look at the Eagles, I mean, they won a Super Bowl, so they're doing things right. But I don't know. That's sort of how I look at it, because I feel like we don't have that game record on the edge yet. And I know that they don't fall from trees, but so I mean, Mafe's there. He's a good player, but where do you put him? Do you put him in that like where do you have his ceiling? Do you still think there's quite a bit of a ceiling for him, or you think he's kind of there? Let's lock him up.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who got a sack in what, like 8 consecutive games. Like, he's not in the Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons class by any stretch. He's not a Watt or a Bosa, but I don't think you're going too far down the list, especially once you adjust for age. And in terms of edge guys that are more attractive than him, like I would say he's top 15 to 20 in terms of just like the attractiveness of the skill set, production, and age. Yep. And certainly right now his cost. He's the type of guy that gets a $23 million a year contract on the open market a year from now. And the other thing to just keep in mind is like the NFL just signed new TV deals across the board. We just saw the salary cap jump 9%. It's probably going to do that again next year. So like inflation's a real thing in the NFL. The dollar is less and less valuable every year. It takes more of them to get the guys that you want. And so like, okay, what is your path to a better edge than Boye Mafe? You're probably not going to draft that guy at 18, right? No. You want Myles Garrett? Well, that's DK in a first, right? Myles Garrett's 30. He's still awesome. Like, yeah, would love to have him. He's 2 first rounders in a second, or he's DK in a first and a second. Is he so much better than a Hall or a Mafe that you can afford to punt chances to fill other holes to bring in a guy like that? You're not going to get Micah Parsons. You're not going to get a Watt or a Bosa. You're not going to get Roquan Smith. You're not going to draft Abdul Carter. I mean, what would it take to trade up to number 1 or number 2 from 18, right? Like you're not in a position where outside of like identifying a guy in the draft that somehow got past everyone's radar, like a Jared Verse, right, who falls to the back half of the first round, then sure, great. Like try and do that. But the cost of getting the proven guy who's better than Mafe, that's better than Hall, that's better than Nwosu, it's too much. So you do have to moneyball this. You have to recreate Myles Garrett in the aggregate. And I think Seattle can do that pretty well with the guys they have. But Mafe, what I will tell you is the next 3 years of Boye Mafe is a lot cheaper today than the next 3 years of Boye Mafe is going to be a year from today.
No, I agree with you on that, Jackson. And the one thing for me too, when I look at this, edge group, just for an example, and we're talking about Hall because he's going to be up, and Chenna, and the D line as a whole, and Leonard Williams, and Byron Murphy. When for me, what I want to see Seattle do is add to his strength already. Keep the guys you have and then add to it. Get another edge that has a skill set similar to a Derek Hall or Boye Mafe that you can have and keep. That's what the Eagles have done. They've added
just wave after wave, man.
Yeah, just again, they won the Super Bowl without having a blitz. They literally rushed for the entire Super Bowl and caused problems for that Chiefs team. So for me, it's going to be interesting to see what they do and who they resign and let walk and cut. But like you said, and I agree with you, they got to do it soon. So, but with that being said, part of this and how this can get addressed is Geno and DK situations. And I know I sent you a message at one point this season where I said, okay, Jackson, I am now on the hill with you. I will die on the Geno Smith hill with you.
Yeah.
I have my Geno jersey. I went to the game and I rocked it when they played the Vikings. And when I sat and watched that Vikings game this year, the one thing for me that I took away, because at that time everyone was talking about Sam Darnold and what, does Seattle go after and get Sam Darnold? Is that how they reset their quarterback room, so on and so forth? And I sat there watching the game and I was there with some friends that are diehard Vikings fans. And the big thing for me was I went and looked and I said, okay, the difference right now between Sam Darnold and Geno Smith has nothing to do with age, nothing to do with talent. It's Sam Darnold currently has an elite NFL play caller, and he has an above average NFL offensive line. Those are what makes Sam Darnold different than Geno Smith and make him look more appealing to everybody. If you put Geno Smith in those situations with that kind of setup, I think you're going to see a better quarterback at the time. Based on what you heard today from John Schneider and what you've seen on social media about Geno, what do you think Geno's contract extension looks like? Because it sounds like it's going to get done. What do you think it looks like?
In the same way that this is not the year to be looking for a new quarterback. If you have a Geno Smith, that scarcity also makes Geno Smith a lot more attractive. Right? When your number one competition on the open market is Sam Darnold, Geno Smith make a lot of money. So, I had said I said earlier in the season, if you offered me Geno Smith 3 for 130, so that's like 43 a year, and you guarantee a little north of half of that, call it 70 to $80 million of that, like I would sign that right now. I think the hopes that he is going to sign for less than 30 million are unrealistic because there's just teams. I mean, there's teams talking about paying Matthew Stafford $50 million, right? Like, I don't think that gap is that big anymore. The Giants, the Jets, the Titans, the Browns, the Raiders, on and on and on. There's, I think I counted earlier, 9 teams that need a quarterback. Geno's the best option out there. And so I think it probably looks something like 3 for 135, team option in the third year. So guarantee $80 million of that. It's essentially a 2-year, $80 million deal. I would do that. And, I think my pivot, if some other team is out there willing to give him $50 million a year, that's probably where I step off and I say, you know what, I'm going to take I'll trade Atlanta a 4th round pick. I'll take Kirk Cousins, have them eat the majority of that contract, Russell Wilson style, pay Cousins for 1 year on, a single-digit million salary, and just say, hey, bridge quarterback. And then next year you get really aggressive. But if you move on from Geno, you are painting yourself into a corner to take whatever you can get at quarterback after this year.
Yeah, I mean, do you think there is that line though? Do you think the Hawks do have that line? Because like you said, there's always going to be a desperate amount of teams that'll overpay for somebody, right? Like you're talking $50 million for Stafford. I love Matthew Stafford. I mean, I think you get.
Oh yeah, I'm a big Matt Stafford respecter.
Yeah, he's a bad man if you get him in the playoffs. Like it's like you just don't want to face that guy. But
yes,
so I understand where you start hearing those rumblings with that number. But yeah, I mean, because there is a camp that's out there that says, listen, do exactly what you just said and let him go, right? Let's bridge it with a Kirk. You save money and you can put all that money into the offensive line or wherever the other needs are, because this team's not quite ready. And then, like you said, next year you go get that quarterback. But if they do make the deal, sort of where the number you think, do you still think they go draft a quarterback in a day 2 and a day 3, because you can get some value there? And at least, again, we talk about the heat he's taken for the O-line. He's also had the heat of not taking a quarterback. Do you actually see him doing it this year?
Yeah, I mean, day 3 picks, like whatever. The hit rate is so low at every position. Sure, bring in competition for Sam Howell to compete to maybe be the next guy. But
what if they took a dart at 18? I'm just throwing that. I've heard that. We had a guy on our show yesterday said he wouldn't be mad at it. He's getting the hype, and I think he even said he'd be a reach, no question. But I think he's going to go in the first round because his hype. Just wait till the combine's over. Yeah, it might be projected top 10. But would you be upset at it?
It happens every year, right?
Yeah.
Would I be upset with that at 18? Yeah, I think so, because I think the only reason, Jackson Dart could be good. Totally. He totally could. I've seen enough from him to think, like, yeah, right situation, he could be a good NFL quarterback. The chances that Jackson Dart is ever like demonstrably better than what Geno Smith is right now, I think are extremely slim. I think the Jackson Dart conversation only exists because of this quarterback class. Like if Jackson Dart came out in last year's quarterback class, I think he's Spencer Rattler. Next year's quarterback class, like if you want to take let's say Seattle has the exact same season, win 10 games, picking 18 next year. Well, there's going to be real quarterbacks that you can take at 18 next year, which is great because you're only committed to Geno for one more guaranteed year. So that's when you do it. Yeah, I would honestly kind of be pissed off if they did that. I think that's prisoner of the moment thinking.
The thing for me with it is I want to see them add a quarterback this year. I don't want to see it in the first 2 rounds, though. I have an idea in my head of who I think they're going to take, and I think they're going to get him where they want to get him. And the name I'm going to say I think is going to piss a lot of people off, but there's a connection that was made today by Tom Paracello that makes me even think this is more likely. Is I think there's a good shot Seattle in round 4, maybe round 5 takes Quinn Ewers. And here's the reason I say this, and I see Jackson's kind of quasi disapproval, but the thing is John brought Quinn Ewers up out of the random when he was talking about JSN 2 years ago, which is odd for John to do, just to bring up another college player that isn't even potentially going to be a draftable guy for at least 2 years. He has had a close tie with the guy that's representing Quinn Ewers for a long time. And now Quinn Ewers is training with Mike McCarthy, who we know John Schneider has a great affinity for Mike. And I feel like he'll trust Mike. If Mike says to John, hey, look, this is a guy you want potentially, I think that's a guy that they may go at. Now, again, I think it's that end of day 2 into early day 3 that they take that swing. I don't think this is a class where you take that swing on a dart or that in the first 2 picks, at least that you have. Go get O-line, go get an impact defensive player if you can. Go do something that's going to address a need that's really a need right now, or strengthen an area that you already have as a strength. Then you can use your late round picks, like you said, Jackson, on flyers, where, you know what, if you take Quinn Ewers in round 5 and it doesn't pan out and he beats out Sam Howell, but you don't know, then maybe next year you can be more aggressive and go, hey, we know Quinn's not going to be our guy, but there's a Garrett Nussmeier or there's an Archie Manning in the draft, and we want to go after that guy and be aggressive. You can still do that in theory, but that's kind of how I think this plays out overall. But you listen to John today, like talking about Geno, like he even said, he's like, we're building, like on Florio and Sim's show, he goes, Geno's earned the respect, and I'm basically alluded to earning a contract extension. He's been consistent, and these are direct quotes. He's been consistent. We're building around him now. He's shown he can handle the offense. We're not in a rush to replace him. We're sitting down with his people this week. He wants to be here. We want him here. It's about finding the right number to keep us flexible He then added, look at his numbers, 66 completions, low turnovers the last 2 years. He's not the issue. We've got to protect him better and run the ball to take pressure off of him. Those are direct from John Schneider. So I think that should tell everybody.
He's right.
Yeah, exactly. And then like Florio pressed him. He goes, so no QB in the first round. And Schneider said, not this year. Geno's our guy for 2025. We might look at a developmental kid later, but we're not forcing it.
Great. That's freaking awesome. That's exactly what I want to hear. So yeah, your hypothetical of Quinn Ewers in the fourth. Yeah, sure. Whatever. I don't give a shit.
Take the swing.
Like, I really don't care what they do on Saturday of the draft. Like, shoot for upside. I don't give a shit. Your hit rate is like 5% at that point. So whatever. Maybe catch lightning in a bottle. Maybe he's Dak Prescott in the fourth round. But like, John Schneider said that about Quinn Ewers 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And Quinn Ewers was 1 year removed from being the number one recruit in all of high school football. He's gotten worse. Like, nothing about Quinn Ewers tells me he's going to be a successful NFL quarterback. I'm wrong all the time, though. Like, I'm wrong all the time. So, like, maybe he will be. But if you use second round pick on Quinn Ewers, third round pick on Quinn Ewers, I'm not going to be loving that.
For me, the two guys that I've got that I'm the highest on, if they are to take a guy for a developmental role and, you know, build him in, are either Kyle McCord out of Syracuse. I like him, but I think, again, you can get him in rounds 4 and 5. I really like Will Howard. Same kind of deal. Another guy that proves he can win. And the thing for me was watching him in the college football playoff on third down and some of the throws he made. Like, he has that gamer mentality where, yeah, he may not be a Patrick Mahomes, but he's a guy that you know that is going to rally guys around him to go play. And that Ohio State team, yes, they were extremely talented, but you can see he made plays to also help elevate that team where he wasn't just kind of coasting along for the ride. And the last guy I know a lot of people are scared of for me is Tyler Shock. Even though he's older, I still like him as a developmental guy that you bring in. Those are the three guys for me that I look at and I go, yeah, you know, if Seattle swung at one of them later in the draft day, I'd be okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's just three different Sam Howells to me. Like, sure, take a shot.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? It wouldn't be surprising me at all either if he didn't take anybody because, you know, we sat around here. I remember we had these same conversations. Spencer Rattler, we threw out a bunch of guys and they didn't take a quarterback. So, you know what?
I mean, the hit rate for top 10 quarterbacks is like 50%. Like, 100, these guys aren't going to make it.
No,
like, if they do, it's a bonus. So, like, take a swing late, but like,
yeah,
do not in this class, do not use any of your picks on the first two. If Cam Ward falls to 18,
you grab him.
Okay.
Obviously.
Yeah, let's have a conversation, but that's not going to happen.
No.
So, like, don't force it in a bad class. Like, and I say this as a repentant, oh my God, maybe they should take Malik Willis. Like, I know Geno just had a good year, but Malik Willis, what if he's available? If he falls to them. Oh my God, second round. Seattle has 2 second round picks. Maybe we should take Malik Willis with this. He's still there in the third. Let's take Malik Willis. Like, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I said the same thing about Spencer Rattler. Like, hey, take him in the third round, take him in the fourth round, right? I mean, he was available all the way. He was available real late. But again, you know, like it's one of those things. But and also John's history of not really taking anybody. He's taken Russell Wilson and whatever the other guy's name was. So it's kind of like Alex Magoo, whatever, right? So it's kind of like it's not going to shock us if he doesn't
respect on Alex Magoo's name. He is an MVP. Alex Magoo,
but it wouldn't surprise me because of also that and that he wouldn't take anybody. But you know what? Real quick, what's your overall outlook coming into this offseason overall? Like, just, you know, for a successful offseason for you, what needs to be done is because in my opinion, there's not a lot of things, but there's a couple of key things. So just wrapping it up overall, when you know we fast forward a few months from now, what would be a successful offseason here for John?
I think like a perfect Jacson offseason looks like extending Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, and Boye Mafe and freeing up a lot of money. I'd like to see them keep Riq Woolen, but I can see that price tag getting pretty high. And his agent just saying play out this year and go make a fuck ton of money next year. But I'd like to see them do that. I'd like to see them cut Tyler Lockett, Draymond Jones, George Fant, a few other guys where you can free up some money. But by extending those guys that I mentioned, you now give yourself a ton of flexibility to then go sign Trey Smith and you sign, freaking what's his name? Drew Dahlman. Like, go do that. And then let Laumea and Haynes and whoever else compete for that that last interior spot. And I hope that the guy they're competing with is who they take at 18. And that's how I want to see them approach this. Is I think you can still re-sign Kobe Bryant. I don't think like the secret's out on him yet. I think that he's more valuable to Mike McDonald than he is to most teams. Like, do that. But like, don't create holes in a fragile 10-win roster. Like, make no mistake, they won 10 games. I'm not in the business of like subtracting wins because wins in the NFL are hard. But it's a very fragile 10-win team. This is not a team where it's like, oh, move on from Geno Smith and the next guy behind this fucking offensive line is going to be better. Like, give me a break. You don't move on from DK Metcalf. He's not going to cost you top 3 receiver money anymore because you've misused him for the last 2 years. His numbers are down. But like, both McDonald and Schneider said the first question they asked all their offensive coordinator candidates were, what are we going to do with 14? How are you going to weaponize this dude? Because the last two haven't. Brian Schottenheimer, he turned DK Metcalf into a god. Like, that's what you need to be doing. And the added benefit of committing to these guys is you get to move their money around. You get to push it out to win. The salary cap is $300 million next year and then $325 million the next year. Like, push that money out then. Make inflation work for you instead of against you. That's what smart teams do. So make those decisions early. Give them the bag, quote unquote, overpay for them now because there'll be bargains in a year. Free up the money to go make 2 big splashes, get Dahlman and Smith on the offensive line, and then hammer the goddamn trenches in the draft. I don't want to hear about quarterback. I don't want to hear about wide receiver. I don't want to hear about any of that shit. The trenches is where you got to be, and there is a clear path to it.
Yeah, 100%.
You mentioned DK there, Jackson. And the one thing for me with DK is like, again, people asked Schneider today. One reporter from another team asked Schneider a really poorly worded question where Schneider gave him a typical sarcastic answer in regards to whether or not, or where do things stand with DK? And John basically said, Stan, he's on our team. Like, he's under contract. He's big. He's strong. Like, what else do you want from me?
Yeah.
But Florio kind of went into it a little bit more. And I think honestly, the PFT live interview got more in depth about things. So I strongly suggest listeners to go watch that. They asked, like, so he's locked in for 2025. He goes, Schneider responded, he's under contract. We're happy with that. We'll talk to his people this week, but he's a big piece of this whole equation. And he goes, Schneider didn't commit to an extension, but basically, like Greg Bell and some others have alluded that like Smith and Ernest Jones are top 2 priorities of getting done. And then it's DK basically is the next guy in line there, which I'm fine with. It makes sense. I don't think DK Metcalf is going anywhere.
No, hell no.
He has never. I mean, yeah, right. Ryan, I feel you, man. Bryce, I feel you. Like that. This has all been narrative stuff. The radio stations have 11 hours of local sports that they have to fill every single day. These are narratives, right? This is the 33rd team tweeting out an unnamed source thinks that the Chargers would be a good fit for DK Metcalf. And all of a sudden that's aggregated to all the big things. Oh, or DK Metcalf to the Chargers. And like, come on, man. Yeah. When NFL teams get a lot of things wrong, but the things that on aggregate they get right is they keep their best players. There's a reason that you don't see the best players make it to unrestricted free agency. It just doesn't happen. Yeah. And the Seahawks aren't going to let that happen with DK Metcalf.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Unnamed source team trying to ban the tush push. That was news today.
It's not unnamed anymore.
No,
It's the
it's Green Bay.
Packers.
It's Green Bay
It's
Packers.
the Packers.
But at
Yeah,
first
you
it was
go get
unnamed.
some sand in your pants on defense.
Yeah,
That's how
no
you get rid
doubt.
of the tush push.
Hey, stop crying. But yeah, no, the whole DK thing. You know, just thing real quick, wrapping it up is I hate when they're like, well, he's not Justin Jefferson. It's like, no, but he's your best receiver. So, stop it. You like you said, you sign him before he hits free agency, you lock him up, and then you let the guy that can get the most out of him,
Yes.
let him and unleash him.
You're
which
a
is yet
young
to-
10-win roster. You do
Yes.
not get better by creating
Yeah.
holes
Yeah.
in
No.
that roster.
Yeah, and I hate the narrative. Well, and then JSN has and I love JSN, but like, how quick are we? Oh, now he's number one receiver. DK can go. It's just it's got to stop, and we
You
all
can
agree.
have a 1A and a 1B. It's an
Well,
okay
it's not even
situation to
1A,
have.
1B. It's just like he's not expendable because it just the whole thing. I just can't wait till the deal gets done, and then we can stop talking about it. But Jacson, awesome chopping it up with you, man. It's been again, every time you come on, we love it. It's always a good time. It's always a good conversation. Before we get you out of here, though, we know you got the podcast, Cigar Thoughts.
Right.
What else you got going on? What do you got coming up on Cigar Thoughts? You got some cool stuff happening there?
We do. Yeah. Very, very excited. So we took a couple weeks off after the Super Bowl. We did a little wrap-up episode. And our first guest back is going to be great. We're going to be recording that as of right now, scheduled for Monday, probably post Tuesday. As you guys know, and as you mentioned before we went on the air, I did lay down the pen in terms of writing the Cigar Thoughts articles. That's going to be really weird. It doesn't feel weird yet because there's been no games to write about since the last one. But that'll be an adjustment. What I will say is the Cigar Thoughts podcast is going to remain Seahawks centric, but we are looking to start talking about the NFL as a whole more, because there's so much that is so interesting that I just love to talk about, and we're so fortunate to get folks in the national media to come on the show and talk about it. So there will be a slight pivot where we get a little bit more expansive in terms of talking about the NFL from a higher altitude. And we'll obviously keep talking Seahawks, but we're going to expand a little bit this year. And I'm very, very excited for that because, like I always say on my show, I'm a football fan first and a Seahawks fan second.
I love it. Yeah, that's exciting to hear, man. And you know what? You do have an awesome show. You got some big time guests coming on the show. We've been a fan of the show for a long time now. So yeah,
Thank
man,
you.
keep up the good work. And as always, we appreciate you coming on, and definitely love to have you on again. And we'll talk Hawks.
Yeah, man. I love you guys. I wish we all lived in the same town so we just belly up to a bar and do this.
We'll make it.
Informally,
We can. Yeah, we. I mean, we'll still make that happen for sure.
All right,
we'll make that
let's
happen.
for sure.
Absolutely.
Let's go play 18 and find a cocktail afterwards.
Yeah, that's a deal.
All right. Cheers,
All
boys.
right, man. All right.
See you, man.
Talk later. Thanks, Jacson. Guys, that was Jacson Bevins on the show again. I love having Jacson on the show, man. He comes on, just got an awesome perspective. Especially we're talking Geno Smith, and we get into the numbers and the DK. And he even said, he puts in perspective. Listen, like, even if you think this guy's not a top whatever, he's a great receiver, and the inflation is a real deal in the NFL. So you have to think about that. Like, people have to realize it. And when you listen to the show, we've talked about this as well. You push this money around. You can play with this money. Extension doesn't mean like now you're just locked into these guys forever. You're actually saving money. You're actually being able to have some flexibility with the money. So, the way Jacson talks about it just gives a better light for people that are listening, that listen, these guys are going to be able to move money around, make it work. We just increased the salary cap, and it's going to increase again. So, that's, to listen to that, to hear that, it puts into perspective. Look, they are going to have money, especially when they do make some of these cuts like we talked about.
Well, and that's the thing, like the whole conversation there, like it's more about who are they cutting than it is who are they keeping on this, out of this group of free agents or potential free agents. And then again, like the three main guys, I think that the extension wise are going to be the interesting dominoes to fall is Geno, Ernest Jones, and DK. Because I do think there will be an extension for DK. I think though DK's extension you will see maybe in training camp, and it's going to give them more free money for the season than it being right now. But I think Geno and Ernest Jones are their next big ticket items that they're going to deal with. And it'll be interesting. But the one thing I'll say is I really strongly encourage our listeners to go watch John's press conference and then go over to Pro Football Talk and watch his interview.
Yes.
There is a different tone to John Schneider this offseason. And I think part of it is now John understands that he is now solely in charge, where I think, like, Jackson alluded to it. That was John's first offseason without Pete. And Pete was still mainly the guy in Seattle when he was calling and making the decisions. Now it's John's show, and he's got a head coach that I don't think is just going to sit there quietly. No. I think Mike McDonald's the type of guy that's going to say, hey, this is a deficiency. How are we fixing it now? Not how are we fixing it 5 years from now? How are we fixing it right now so we can be a competitive football team and go push for a division title?
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that, man. But again, guys, go follow Jacson Bevins, Cigar Thoughts. If you haven't seen it yet, he brings in some primetime guests. And not only that, he's just got a great football knowledge. He's been doing this for a long time. So he's one of our favorites to listen to, one of our favorite guests. So again, guys, go check him out, sub to his channel. And don't forget to sub to our channel too, guys. And we got some cool stuff that we've just unveiled the last couple of weeks. The membership program, guys, the link's down there, and go check it out. It kind of gives you all the details as well. We are now on fieldgoals.com, so our content is going to be up there as well. So go over there because you're going to get a lot of cool articles. Plus, we're on there as well. So it's good, guys. Hit the notification bell because that's going to let you know when HawksZone is going live. So that's it for us tonight. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.